and welcome back to this tutorial. This is the model that we left off with on the last tutorial, and what we're going to do this time is create a few details on the front using a few extra tools to do so. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing is we had this character as our reference. I'm just going to turn him off for now. And the first tool I want to look at here is under the tweak settings. So you'll have to scroll down until you find show open edge. And this will highlight any issues that I have on this mesh. So let's just click it and we'll see what happens. So it highlights any open edges as you might expect. And the base one, we are kind of happy with that one because it is an open edge. But if you notice at the back here, it shows these two lines. So it's telling me that there's two open edges on here, actually 4 open edges on here. And I need to kind of weld these together. Now I thought I'd done that before in the previous one, but clearly I haven't. So this is a good way to check those mistakes. So if I click on move, it deselects that tool, and I'm going to go over and select points, zoom in on the problem area, and if I grab this point here and move it, you can see sure enough that point is not welded. So the show open edge tool has helped me to identify that problem when it's not quite visible to the naked eye as to whether it was welded or not. So just by moving this tool now, moving this vertex close to the other vertex in this direction and letting go of the mouse, it will now weld that those two vertices together. And now I've got this option of checking. So if I hit show open edge, you can see that this one here has disappeared. I've still got one on the reverse side that's broken. So let's correct that one now. Repeat the move, go in. You can already see here that when we get close to it, you can see that the sort of nice thin line there becomes a little bit thicker here. So that's telling me that there's already a problem. So again, I'll click on the vertex that's not welded, move it close to the one that I want it to weld to and let go. And now that should have corrected. So as we zoom out, you can see those two lines have now disappeared. So the next thing I'm going to do now is create some details around the front here. And I'm going to use the measure tool again to create a kind of a carving inside the front here of the front wall, which will extend all the way around the back of this wall. So with the measure tool here, I'm going to measure from here, and I'm going to use this line here that we created before as a kind of a point of reference. And now I know from the measurements I made last time that this was 0.5 of a meter, and I want to make this continue around here for 0.5. So I'm going to measure up from this line that I made and use that as my reference point. So if I click on the point here at the front of the building, because this is the straightest line, let me just go into orthographic just to be a little bit more accurate, and I click on there and move up, and I can place my ruler, my edge there, hit escape to drop the tool at 0.5 of a meter, and now I can come in with the split rings tool here and snap my next cut across there at that measurement. So I've added an extra loop in there to give me, let me just move that tool off, it's a bit distracting when it's flashing all the time. This area here, which I'm going to use as my kind of embossed or carved out area. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that now. So I've got my front part done here. And then what I'll do is move to the front here, and so I can get an accurate measurement here, I'm now going to measure down here. So again, I'll use this measure tool again, is click on the measurement. This is why orthographic view is really useful, because I can kind of get my positioning fairly accurate. And measure down 0.5 meter. Again, click the mouse to accept it. Okay, a little bit wonky there, but it's okay for this. And make my next cut across there. Alright, so turning off the measure tool, I can now delete those two measurements that I made. Don't need those distracting me anymore. Okay, so what I'm going to do now I've made those cuts is to select the area that I've just created using the select and face tool here. And all I'm going to do is just left click to select the polys that I want to do the next operation on. Now I can select them individually like this, and then I want to go around. But if I do, let's say, a double click on the next one, it will select the whole loop all the way around. But if you notice at the back or inside here, the temple, it's selected all those ones inside, which I don't want. So it's made that loop around when I double clicked, but it's selected every polygon. And I only want the ones on the outside of the building. So let's just deselect that, and I'll start again and start to make my selection. And what I can do instead to speed things up rather than doing every one is if I select this one, for example. Now you can see I've got these ones selected here. If I hover over this one, hold shift down and double click, then it will select everything from the last poly that I selected and the one I've just hovered over here, and it will select all the ones in between. So that way I can speed up my selection process on here. So let's try that one again. So hover over the next poly that you want, hold shift and double click. Okay, and I'll try it again. Hover, double click, and then I'll just hold shift and then manually do the others one by one until I've got that whole selection. Okay, now with those selected, I'll go down here onto this one, which is selected. So anything that is selected inside on the model here, now I have these tools available to me to do an operation on those on the selected polygons. And I'm going to choose this inset here. The little dialog pops up in the corner, you can see it over here. And I want to just inset these, and almost as if it's a carving inside. So I'll just start to move those inwards like so. And I'm not going to be accurate with this. I'm just going to eyeball it and just, yeah, that will do. And say OK. And then once that one's done, we can go back up, same menu, selected menu, click on Extrude Faces. And remember from the last video, we could use the gizmo to do our extrusion, or we can use these arrows here with a specified amount. And there, again, I'm just going to eyeball this, and I'm just going to push those in, roughly like that. So once that's done, I'll hit Escape to drop the tool, Escape again to drop the selection, and now I've made my first edit on the wall. Okay, so with that done, let's just do a couple more examples. So we'll select these ones in the center. Again, once they're selected, we can use any of these tools. I'll choose Inset again, and I can create my inset into here, something like that. Say OK. Extrude faces. This time I'll pull these ones out a little bit. Escape. Escape again to drop the selection. Alright, and just one more. We'll do it on the top. So the process is the selection, and then once it's selected, you have these operators then that you can use on that selected geometry. So again, it's just trying to just make some kind of details that we can work on later. And extrude faces. And don't forget that we've got these options here to make much more accurate extrusions. So we could, for example, make these level by just making sure that we're aware of the size that we extrude the first one out, and then we can match that size when we extrude the second one. But at the moment, I'm just kind of doing it by eye. Now I'm going to make some steps, just 2 steps at the front of the temple here. So I'm going to use these 2 polys here to do that. So I'll select those 2, use the select transform this time. I'll commit an extrusion, pull this one out, something like that, and hit escape and escape again to deselect. Now I don't need these 2 bottom facing polys down here, so I'll use the delete polys tool here and just delete those 2. Okay. Next thing I'll do is create a split that goes along here, and I'll just use the standard tool for that one. So split rings. So I've got this blue preview line of where it wants to put. I'll hit spacebar, type in 0.5 to put it halfway between those polys, and hit enter, and that gives me that cut down the center. Okay, let's use a different tool now, and this one I'll use the knife tool, and I'm going to snap to my side view here, and this is going to establish the height of the first step, and I'm going to eyeball it. So you can see it's snapping to the split line that I've just put in. So depending on if you want them uneven, I'm just going to put them fairly evenly there in the center. So I'm going to click, hold shift, and this green line represents the knife cut, and I'm going to go beyond this line here. Can you see how it's snapping trying to snap to that one? I'm going to go beyond so it cuts straight the way through, and double click, and now you can see I've got that cut line all the way through. Let's just check. Let's use the move tool here and just see with our points selected, just make sure it's all welded. It is. It's done a good job. And at this point I've got my step shape kind of formed, but I've got these blocks here in the way. Let's use the delete tool again. Delete polys. Where are we? Here. Delete polys, and let's just get rid of these ones here, here, and on the side. Spin it around and delete these ones as well. Oops. Be careful when you're deleting these, because if you notice then I deleted and I accidentally deleted that back face as well. It's just always be careful with that. One of the things that you can check here is ignore back faces as well, just to prevent any kind of deleting of polys that you wanted actually to keep. So again, we'll just delete this one. So now I've got a space where I need to put the step in. So let's start off first of all by putting in a line across here. A polygon across the bottom down here. There's many different ways I can do this, but we'll start with the quads tool here, and I'll choose from this little drop down here. We've got different ways of creating our quad. So I'll use parallel, and I will click on my first edge here, spin this around. You can see it's trying to snap to different edges, and then when I snap to this, spin the view around to this one, it's now going to snap onto there. Now I can do the same thing on this one as well. So I could use the same tool, click, rotate the view around and snap to there. Let's just undo that first and try a different extrusion method here. So on this one I'll use two-click method. So we start in the same way. We select the first edge that we want, but you notice now it's not parallel. It's giving me a vertex point of where to connect to. Now I haven't got any cuts on these faces yet, so I'll have to spin this round and then it will snap to this vertex over here. So when I click it, then that's one thing that you have to make sure. I actually connected it to the wrong point. So let me just escape that. Let's try that one again. Click. Let's try and snap it to this point here. And you can see now that it's giving me the next point to put down. So if it crosses over like it just did, it kind of means that you maybe clicked at this point and then you try to put the first point, next point down here. Let's just try that in this. Let's see if that is how it works. So I'm going to click roughly here, and then I'm going to spin the view around, and I'm going to put my next point at the top there and down. Seems to work on that one. Not quite sure why it crossed over. One more try. Let's see if we can get it to fail. No, it seems to be happy now. Maybe I just did something strange. Okay, so now we've got those two polys in there. What I can do now is I can pretty much do what I did before with the split tool. I can come in, let's say, split tool, split rings, and again hold spacebar, 0.5, and then I can connect those two up. Now, what I'm going to do now is check whether these have welded. Now, before, when I checked, I tried to use this move tool, and I just twiggled the geometry around a little bit to test it. But we already know that if we do show open edge, we can see that we've got the errors on there. We know that this baseline is okay, that's fine. But here, we know that these aren't welded anymore. So we have to go in and weld those points. So again, go to the move tool, we'll zoom in on the problem area, we'll select that vertex there, make sure vertices are selected at the top, and you can see we're not connected. So just hover over and weld that together. And if same here, it's not connected, move it over and weld those two together. Do a quick test to see if that solved the problem, and there we go. So there's another example of how that show open edge tool is a good way just to find out where problems align. One extra thing we can do here as well, just to add a little bit more detail to these steps. If I select the points here, make sure select is chosen in the menu there, and I'll select this little vertex here on this corner, and I'll scroll down or hit spacebar and choose Bevel Vertex on here. You'll see that what I can do now is I can just bevel that vertex there, almost as if it's kind of like chipped away on that corner. And I can also add a face if I want to, or leave it open, but I'll just add the face for that for now. So that's a little extra thing if you want to just add that secondary amount of detail there on those steps. And in the same way, we can now do the same thing with a selection of edges. So for example, now I could select these edges here, and with the edges selected up here, go down, and you can see that in my selected panel here now, it's updated to show me all things associated with edges. So at this point I can come in and I can bevel the top one here, maybe round it out, but I'll leave it like that for now and just say OK to that. And even on these ones I could do the same here. So now if I hit Bevel, now I get a bevel plus that part chipped out on there. And say OK to that. So each of these menus that we choose, or these different ones that we choose up here, changes the selected value, the selection menu in here. So you can see that we've got expand, contract, etc., all based on points. When I click the edges, we've got the same options, expand and contract, but we've got a whole new set of options as well that we can choose from. So for example here, split edge would give us those open edges again, which we saw earlier. By splitting those out, it means we can redirect geometry if we want to as well. And obviously if we select faces, we get a whole new bunch of options for the faces as well. So let's take a look at this points, and I'm going to select a single point on here. If you notice there, I tried to select a single point and it selected 3, and that's because of this brush, the circle that you can see. If I scroll the mouse wheel, it gets a lot smaller, and if I just deselect that original selection and now select, now I'm only selecting 1 point. If I increase the size here and select, I will select all the vertices that are inside this yellow circle. Okay, so you have to be careful and adjust your brush size to affect the selection. But let's say you started with this point and you want to expand it. Then you notice here that I've got this expand button. So now, based on the vertice, if I hit expand, it will start to expand that selection out. And likewise, if I hit contract, it will bring that selection back to the original one that I selected there. Now, in addition to that, if we can see here that we've got some, we've created some n-gons here because of this bevel that we did. So what I can do here is shift click, and let's just shift click those 2 points there, and then use this option called connect and connect those 2 vertices there. Control D to deselect. And let's do that one again. We'll do one on here. Whoops. And then hit connect to connect those 2 points. And finally, we can just do one on here. Okay, so there we can create the extra geometry in there, and then we could let's just do Control D and get rid of that selection, and let's change the selection now to this edges, or maybe the face actually. Select this face now and use transform, and maybe we could just do a free transform on here. So you'll notice with the transform tool, pretty much we've been using the gizmo arrows to move things around, but you'll notice there's a small circle on the inside of the gizmo here, and if you select that, it becomes like a freeform move tool that I can move the whole thing around freely. And this way I can kind of just distort the step a little bit more if I want to. Something like that. And then if I want to move it inwards, or I can use it on a scale as well. So maybe this step's a little bit worn, or had something heavy landed on it in the past and has distorted it like that. So I'll hit escape and escape again, and we'll leave that like that. So next I'm going to create a small kind of like plinth or something over here. So I'm going to zoom in on this side, and I'm going to select this polygon here. Sorry, make sure select is there. Reduce the brush size down and select that poly. And I'll use the Inset tool and just move that in slightly like so. Say OK. And we'll use a different tool now. So we'll use the spine tool here. And with this option box here, I'm going to click on Modify with Spline, and you'll see that now I get a spline, and it's already extruded that face that was selected up for the first one. So you'll notice that I've got a scale on here that I can start to scale this selected face with. Now if I use my left mouse button, it does the same thing, uses that scale there. But what I've got in addition to that are these points, and I can actually move these points around freely, which gives me kind of like a little bit of more control over this. It's probably not the best use of this tool for this, but you get the idea from it. So at this point I've said, okay, that's my first point, and all I need to do now is hit extrude again, and it places another one. Now I can decide, if I snap to this view here, to pull this point a lot higher up, right mouse, scale it in, something like that. And again, I'm kind of like going from different sides. Again, it's not probably the best tool, but if you wanted something that was slightly kind of distorted, or as in this case it's like an old temple and probably just decaying, then this may be a tool that's useful to you. So let's just make something a little bit more. Let's add another couple of points here, something like that. Let's shrink it in and then add another one. Make this one wider, something like that, and one more on there. Just bring this one down, it's a little bit too high. Okay, so at this point I've got my crooked, I'm not sure what it is, but there it is there, and I can kind of like manipulate these and just distort it even more if I want to, or I can go in and you know, snap to these and try and line it up. But I quite like the kind of wobbledy look to it as it is. So at this point I'll say okay, and I'll just escape that tool there and escape the selection. And what I'll try and do now is utilize the selection from the top there, scroll down and expand my selection down until I reach the base at that point. And at this point what I'm going to then do is I'm going to clone these faces here. So when I clone, you'll notice I have a new polygroup over here, and it's created a new object for me. So now if I use the gizmo, I can move this copy over to the other side, roughly where that one was. It doesn't have to be, in this case, it doesn't have to be very accurate. And then I hit apply, and then it puts this brand new copy over onto this side. Notice it's still selected there. We'll just hit escape just to deselect that. So a couple of things have happened. You can now notice that the object is now ghosted, and this is because the new active layer is this one, the clone that we've made. That's why it's a solid color, and the inactive layer has been ghosted and is kind of transparent. Now, it's a bit of an error, a little bit of a bug here. What's happened is it's created a new empty layer for some reason, and we don't need that layer, so I'm just going to delete it. So what we've got is we've got our original temple layer here, which I've just turned off. So polygroup 1 is our temple. In fact, let's label it to make it clear. And then we've got this object here, which is a clone of that, which is going to be our I don't know, our stand, whatever it was called, light. So this is our now cloned version, and it's there. What I want to do is I want to bring it into this layer, into my temple layer. Now, if you notice in the corner, when I roll over the layer, I get these 6 little dots that appear on the end. Those are handles that I can use to drag and drop layers and stack them. and either reorder them or place one layer inside the other. So you can see at the moment I've got the two separate layers. So if I click on the stand here and I drag it and I drop it inside, make sure you hold down Shift and drag it and drop it on top. And now they both become they are both on the same layer. So let's try that again. I'll just undo for now. So we've got our temple here and we've got our stand object there. So I will choose the stand. I will left click, hold the mouse down and press Shift and then drag it to the temple layer and let go. And then it will appear on that, all on the same layer. Now at this point I know that I've got two separate objects and I've got a quad here, a poly at the bottom here, and I don't want that because I want a solid object. Now there's no reason why you can't have that. It may not make sense actually to kind of attach it to this model, but I'm just aiming for a pretty solid model here in terms of the temple itself. So what I'll do is I'll select that polygon there, and in my selection, now it's selected, I will delete that selected object there, which will leave me with the stand and a hole. So at this point I can connect these up. Now we've already touched on a few ways of doing this. I could use the quad tool here, and I've got two-click method on, so let's connect this point and then this point, and it will connect. And now you see that the color of that object now changes because it's now connected to my temple. So that means it's now kind of definitely part of that object and not a separate object. So if I just click on this one, select connect that one to there, we'll connect. And I can also change the tool now, and I'll just try a different method of connecting, which is the add and split. And all I'll need to do here is just connect those two faces to fill in that one there. Okay, now here's a little bit tricky because now I've got this. It's a little bit difficult to sort of get to the back of this one. So let's try something else. I will deselect by hitting Control D. I will choose the select tool and make sure faces are selected. Click the top selection there, scroll down, expand until I reach the bottom of this stand here, and then I'll go down and I will select hide. So at this point I want to hide these ones. Now I don't necessarily want to hide all of them. What I want to do is just hide these top ones, or let's say, yeah, let's just hide all of it. So here I'll select hide, and you can see here it's a little bit easier for me to now connect these together. So I'll use the quads tool again. Let's change the method to direct, and you'll notice I don't have to do two clicks now. It's a direct method, and it's kind of like snapping itself to those points. Okay, and I'll go back and go down to where it says unhide, and I'll bring that object back. Now again, I can use my show open edge just to make sure that those have welded properly, and it seems as if they have when I unhid it, so that's good. I can do another check, use my vertices here and just pull that object there. You can see it's welded it together when I unhid that object. So at this point I can do a little bit of kind of freehand modeling here with this tool and sort of pull these points up maybe if I want to. But there's another tool I'd like to show you, which is the brush tool, which is, instead of me going up to the menu, select menu, and choosing the various faces and edges and points, etc., this brush tool is like an all-encompassing brush which, based on its size, will just grab general geometry and just move it all around, kind of like massage it all around and get a bit more of an organic feel to the model. So you can see here I'm just pulling these points around, and it's affecting pretty much all of it. But again, it gives you a little bit more of a sort of a fall off area is the word I'm looking for, a fall off area for moving. So here, for example, I can completely sort of move these based on the size of the brush. So I'm right clicking, adjusting the size of the brush there, and just moving those around. Now you can see here it's pulling a lot of the other geometry around, which I may not want to, so we do have to be careful with that. But it just is going to help me to sort of change that around a little bit. Okay, and then of course I can go in with the move tool and select the vertices or single faces like this. Let's reduce the brush size down and kind of move these around independently. This is probably a little bit more accurate, and I'm definitely not going to be adjusting any of the other geometry of the main wall here by doing that. So if I reduce that down, or let's say I select the top, let's go to select the top poly there, and missed it, expand that one down, and then go to my move. It doesn't actually do that, does it? So it's not actually moving multiple selected objects at that point, which is why the brush tool is probably a good one to use. You can see that it's quite accurate as well when the brush size is smaller, but it's a little bit more it's a little bit more destructive in terms of general shapes if I start to pull with the larger fall off area. Next I'm going to do a little bit more decoration around the doorway, and I want to just make a kind of a frame around here, almost like a sculpted frame that's been carved out. So I will use the measure tool here, and I'm going to use, let's move this over, this option here called use fixed length, and I'm going to set it to a value of 0.1. When I use this, if you notice, what happens is I'll click on the edge of the door. I want to have a frame that's a width of 0.1 meters. So if I do that, I'll click on here, and you'll see that it doesn't matter where I extend this to, it's always going to be fixed at 0.1. So if I put my measurement there, it'll carry on trying to put another one down. So I'll just hit escape because I only want one measurement on that side, and I'll do the same again on this side. So I'll click on the edge and click 0.1, hit escape, and I'll also go to the top here and do the same again. So I'll click roughly the point there and move up 0.1. So I've got 3 lines here that I can use just to guide me a little bit on here. So I could do this in a number of ways. I could split this around. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the add and split tool here, and I'll use this as a kind of a starting point, I suppose, and move up to there just to give me a rough guide. I'll snap it to there, snap it to there, one to there. You can see how far I'm off, and I'll bring that down to there. I'll hit escape, and I'll do the same on this side. I'll just connect those two together and put that roughly down there. Okay, so I've got this door frame now, and I've used those measurements to try and help me to make an accurate door frame, but as you can see, I failed miserably because I was kind of off when I was coming to these. I needed really to have put all those measurements on each of these, but it's a little bit of a long process, that is, and I don't want to spend time doing that. So I'll use get the measure tool back and just delete those for now. Delete those away. Now we already know how to fix a problem of aligned vertices here. So we can do that again. We can go to our select vertices here, select our vertices that are wrong or misaligned, let's say, on here, and I'll go down to align vertices, and we know that this one was the correct one and that one sure enough is off. So I'll line those ones up, hit escape, and I'll try the same on this one, although I do suspect these were slightly more accurate. So say apply, I think those were fine. So now I'll hit escape. Let's choose these ones, zoom in. So I made some errors on this one. I must have made quite a few clicks in here. So let's just try. Let's just see and go on our Y. Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. Sorry, they were all going across the wrong axis. So you can see here that I think this one was probably which one was it now? I think it was the middle one, wasn't it? That was fine. So let's swap that one round. Yeah. So this one was a more accurate measurement there. So by clicking the align minimum, it's moving these ones up. So I'll set apply to those. Yeah, that looks about right. So what I'll do now is I'll try to make something a bit more interesting over the door, and I'll use the add and split, and I'll just connect this corner here and this one here, and then hit escape, and I'll connect this point here, do the same on the other side. I'm not really fussy if it's not quite the same, and I'll just deselect, make sure I've got nothing selected that shouldn't be, and hit select points, and I'll choose this one and this one, and from here I'll choose select and transform, and with them both selected, the select and transform is taking an average. So here I can kind of like pull these out and rather stretch them and move them up to make this almost like horns, I suppose, on the end there, something like that. And I'll say that's good. So I'll just deselect and deselect, and because I've got this really strange n-gon here that I've made, I can leave it for now if I want to, but I'll just sort of clean that up, and I'll use the add and split, and I'll just connect to that point there, and that one to that one. So the actual door frame is going to be this this area here. So let's select my faces, and I'll select, make sure I deselect, I've got something selected back there, and shift select these ones here like so, and just a little bit of relief on that door frame there. So I'll choose selected, extrude faces, and I'll just pull those faces out there. And if I go to the side view, I can kind of line it up with that face coming out, something like that. Okay, a last thing we do just to wrap this up is we'll just put a little bit of decoration in between these two extrusions that we made using a different method. So I'm going to select with the edges these here, and then I'm going to go with the cut edges option here, and I'm going to choose 5 cuts for those. So that separates those out like so, and then if I hit, whilst they're still selected, connect, they will connect those edges for me, those vertices for me. I'll just deselect those. Let's go and do the same up here. So I'll select edges, choose these 4 edges here, use cut edges 5, and then hit connect. Deselect those. And I'm going to now swap to faces, and I'll choose this face, this one, and this one, and I'll choose Inset, and then altogether I can just inset all those like so and say OK. I need to deselect again, and then I'll select 2 at a time this time. Top one and the bottom one there, and then I'll hit the bridge tool here. So now I can make a bridge between those, and I can increase the number of divisions. I could twist these around if I wanted to as well. Let's try that one. Put some more divisions in there. Something like that. Might look good, but I'll just leave it just for now and just leave it at linear, and I will reduce the twist down to 0. Let's just put the value in there and reduce the number of divisions, say 3, something like that. Okay, and I'll do the same on the other side. I'll just say OK to that one. Select this one. This one, choose bridge, and it will use the same settings as I used before. Say OK to that. So that wraps up this section of detailing the front of our temple. Now these, I would say, are secondary details, and we will go in when we do the painting work on here, and we will place more normal maps on here as well and add even more tertiary details to this. But for now, if we want to just quickly have a look at this and how this looks, one thing we can do really quickly is go over to Mesh, and we can hit this option here called Sculpt Mesh and click on that. Turn off the subdivide. And what that does is it converts this low poly geometry here into a sculpt mesh. And the reason we do that is because now I can go over to the render room here, and now I can see my model being rendered. And if I choose a different shader for it, yeah, that will do. And we can adjust the lighting in here, maybe take the environment lighting down, and we can add a light and increase the intensity of that, bring our environment down, and kind of have a look at how light will be affecting the details that we've made on here. Okay. Now ultimately we're going to take this into Blender and render using Eevee, but this can just give you a little bit of an idea as to how your model's going to look. We can even bring in our reference model in the center there. You can see him through the doorway. Okay, so that wraps up this section. In the next section, we'll start to unwrap this model, getting ready for texture painting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.